Welcome back, friends. This is module number 2, otherwise known as the orientation to the Mini Bible College. What I'd like to share with you now is just an overview of what the content is and how it's structured. So to begin, let's just jump right in with a few facts about the Mini Bible College. First of all, what you'll find is that the Mini Bible College is not a reading through of the Bible verse by verse, but rather it is a survey course, a survey study of the Bible, which also includes a special series on family and marriage, and actually begins with a series called the Sermon on the Mount. You'll find that these lessons are organized into approximately 30-minute lessons each week, or each lesson, and they're very easy to understand. In each case, Pastor Woodward has filled them with practical examples and how you can apply the lessons that are being taught in each case, how you can apply them in your lives. And if you were to take this course once per week, you would find then that you have a Bible study curriculum that will carry you through 4 years of Bible study. And as it's pointing out here on your slide, it says that we distribute this for free in 40 languages, and that's absolutely true. So who studies using the Mini Bible College? As we mentioned a moment ago, we have always intended this to be used in small groups. The curriculum is really structured for a lot of discussion in a small group setting. So that's why it's ideal for your church congregations, your home churches, your house churches, and your congregations that have yet to form a formal structure of a church. It's used often by lay leaders and pastors alike. Many of you have pastors and lay leaders who have been trained for perhaps 3 months, perhaps a year, 2 years. They use this for themselves, for their own learning as they go and as they lead you in your studies. Individuals, of course, will use this in the private setting of their home, on the website, on the apps, and so forth. So individuals gain from this as well. And what we've said before is still true. It is truly a Bible study for personal growth and development, and it obviously is a tool for making disciples among your congregations. It's funny, too, that many times we've seen in the field where pastors have used this training for their service of worship. Think of those who are developing new congregations in very remote areas. And of course, we service only the rural areas. Think of those pastors who have to evangelize and have to build their congregations. Sometimes they're doing it in 1 or 2 villages or even more. So if they leave this tool in one of the houses, one of the house churches, and move on to the next one where they are personally involved, that's how this can be used to teach others while the pastor cannot be everywhere every Sunday or every Saturday or every Friday whenever you worship. Looking at the means of delivery, many of you are familiar with the pictures you're seeing here. Our content is delivered on solar-powered audio players in several markets, in several operating areas. These solar-powered units are made in South Africa, they're made in Israel, they're assembled in India, they're assembled in Indonesia, and in Vietnam we actually have one that's made there as well. So these are the means of delivery that you're familiar with. But more importantly is what is on those units. Let's consider the fact that on these little microchips embedded into these units, you'll find 110 hours of Bible teachings. In total, there are 215 audio lessons. And the way they're organized is there are 24 lessons for the series called Sermon on the Mount. There are then 90 lessons for the Old Testament survey and 90 more for the New Testament survey. And finally, there is a series of 11 lessons at the end considered to be family and marriage. What does the Bible say about the role of the father and the mother in the family unit, and of the children? Everyone has a responsibility, biblically speaking, and it brings those out in very practical examples. So again, this is a survey course. It is not verse-by-verse study of the Scriptures. In the next slide, what you're seeing is a more deliberate and more detailed view of the content. And friends, this is where we want you to pay attention and to also take notes if you don't have a handout in front of you. But we encourage our leaders of the partnerships to print these out for you. On the audio players, there is not a menu that you can see what all of the content is. So if you print these as a handout, you will not only see the structure and the flow of the audio lessons, but you will also see, in each case, how many lessons there are for each individual category. For example, let me walk you through the slide you're viewing right now. For the series entitled Sermon on the Mount, there are 24 lessons of 30 minutes each. And then when you move into the Old Testament survey, you see what we call a course. Course number 2 being Genesis and Exodus. From those books, you will find, looking all the way to the right side of the screen, that there are 14 lessons then in this category covering those books of the Bible. Another example, look at number 3. Course number 3 consists of the books of the Bible covering Leviticus through Joshua. And in that case, looking again to the right side column, what you see is that there are 12 lessons in that category covering those books of the Bible. So following down through then, this is how the content is organized into the Old and the New Testaments. The next slide will show you even more. It begins with the introduction to the New Testament, and then it continues on through Hebrews and Revelation, number 13, for which there are how many lessons? I'm seeing 18 lessons. Did you find that? And then the last section, the series called Family and Marriage, consisting of 11 lessons. So friends, what is important about this? You know how many lessons there are in each of these courses and the way they're organized. What we hope that will give you is an opportunity to perhaps do a review at the end of each one of these series, or each one of these courses the way they're described here. In many cases, when we talk later about our instruction manual, you will see a certificate that you can also make up. Some of our partners are actually looking at this by course and issuing certificates when the people who participate in small groups complete each of these courses. But certainly when you look at this from the standpoint of the 4 major series, the Sermon on the Mount, the Old Testament, the New Testament, and Family and Marriage, those are in fact 4 different opportunities where you can actually give a certificate to the participants. So how much fun would that be? Can you imagine? And think of the content, think of the people who like to see, it's human nature to see your name on a certificate. It feels like you've accomplished something. It gives you a sense of completion of one course and you can move to the next. So think of how important that might be to those who are participating in the small groups. We find that it really does help. So that's how this is organized. So let us go on to the next one, which shows you the various components that consist of the Mini Bible College curriculum. The components consist of the audio lessons, as we said. How they're delivered then on the solar-powered audio players is one method. Another method, of course, is using CDs. Many of you use that method. Or even flash drives now for those who have computer access and can do it that way. You'll also find that this is something you can download right off of the website. And that's many times how this is being used. The second component then is a booklet, and actually it's a series of 3 booklets. The first one is called the Leader's Guide. The Leader's Guide is intended to give leaders of small groups a series of questions that they can use in discussion in the small group ministry. The questions are preceded by a small section of maybe 1 or 2 pages describing what the content will be of that particular audio lesson. And by the way, there is a 1-for-1 relationship between the audio lessons and the Leader's Guide pages. For every audio lesson, there is a chapter in the Leader's Guide that gives the questions that can be used for small group discussion. So then the next booklet is called a study booklet. Here again, this is something that the leader can use. It is essentially commentaries. It covers more background information than what you would find in the Leader's Guide or on the audio lesson. It gives more background to make the leader of the small group better prepared in discussing the Bible in general as it relates to that particular audio lesson. The final booklet is called a student workbook. It's very much the same as the Leader's Guide, with one distinction. The Leader's Guide has the answers to the questions in bold. For example, true or false, or A, B, C, and D. It gives the answers to the questions in bold. But on the student workbook version of the same booklet, the answers are not given in bold, so the leaders can lead the discussion, and the students with the student workbook can follow along, and they can mark the answers, and they can discuss it that way. So these are the three booklets that are used to complement the audio lesson that you've just been told about. So overall, we're now working in actually 78 countries with this curriculum, and we know there are estimated more than 52,000 small groups using these teachings, so we encourage you to be one of those. So before I get into this next slide, let me take a pause to just let you absorb and ask questions about this, and then we'll come back. So if you have questions right now, ask your leaders of your ministry, and we'll come back then to the website in just a moment. So hey friends, welcome back. I hope you've had a chance to have some discussion and answer some questions regarding what you've heard so far. So what we'd like to do now is just continue with this overall orientation to what MBC is all about, and specifically to come back into the website and everything that's available to you there. So let's look at that by going through step by step what you see on the website when you come into it. To begin with, what you're going to see is the website itself in yellow on your screen here, mbc.icm.org. Now, when you come into this site, you should be able to recognize your own language right away. That is, these programs are set up so that it recognizes the URL that you're coming in with. If your language does not appear right away, then certainly you go to this top right-hand corner where the red letters are showing you choose your language. You can click on that box then to begin right away in your own language. Follow that first red line though, and you can also see that you can click on the button in the middle there which says choose a language. So you have the option there. And if you are already in your language, then you can certainly click on the button to the right of that, which says begin your study. So it's really that easy. So the next thing you see when you click on the language up at the top right-hand corner is this drop-down to give you your language selections, assuming you're not already there. Then the next thing you'll see is the organization of our lessons, and they're set up into the four main categories. If you look on the left side of this screen, you will see in gray the letters showing you Sermon on the Mount. That's a major series. Then Old Testament Survey, another major series, followed by another major series further down in gray, the New Testament Survey, and then you would also see Family and Marriage. If you go to the first arrow that we're showing you on this screen, I'd like you to follow across toward the top center where it's pointing to a box that says Create an Account. If you create an account, the beauty of it is that this system will remember where you left off on any given lesson, and it will also keep a dashboard for you so that you can see which lessons you've already completed. And that way you won't have to go back and backtrack every time. And also, when you have set up an account, if you look at that little box to the right of the one that says Create an Account, that is your login. If you've already logged in once, you can come right back into it using that box, if you've already registered once, that is. So the other thing we'd like to point out is, let's say you go into the Old Testament survey and you click on that gray area. What you're going to see next is the series of courses below that. So the first course in that category begins with Genesis and Exodus. That is the books of the Bible covered by this first course. And then the next course would be Leviticus through the book of Joshua. So you can see how this flows. Looking to the right, let's use again the line that says Genesis, Exodus. Look to the right of that and you will see a box that says Begin Your Study. And that is right away where you can get into the series of lessons in that category, in that course, for Genesis through Exodus. The box to the right of that really says Lesson Index. That will give you a drop-down showing you all of the lessons in that particular course, covering the books of Genesis through Exodus. To the right of that box is one that says My Downloads. And we want to show you what happens when you get into that. So we'll show you in another slide. When you click on My Downloads, this is what it looks like. It gives you an option to listen to the course audio lesson, to look at the leader's guide, the student workbook, or the study guide, that is the study booklet. When you go into any specific lesson then, the screen to the right of what you're looking at here shows you what you see when you open up that one lesson. You see the title of the lesson, you have the ability to listen, or you have the ability to download, either case. So let me get my face away from that a moment. Looking at it, you can go to that one or that one, and you can find what you're looking for on that specific lesson. So, all told, that is how the website is being used, and we just invite you to get into it anytime you want. So let me come back then to that screen and show you one more time. You can listen to it, or you can do the downloads by clicking those two brown boxes. Okay? That's how the website works. So the next thing we want to show you is just a summary of what we've been talking about and why MBC is so different. The first point to remember is that this is not a reading of the Bible, this is a survey course. So it's going to focus just on key messages from each of the books that are covered in each of these courses. Key messages then that are brought out in such a way that they're easy to understand. We definitely like to see the use of this teaching as well as the booklets in a small group setting, because that's the way the teachings actually encourage you to talk about it, and that's how the Bible comes alive. You know, the Bible on its page all by itself means nothing until you see it, listen to it, grasp it within your mind and in your hearts. And the interactive way that this comes about in a small group is just invaluable. You know, why not learn from one another as you go? That's the whole point. Now, friends, when you're talking to the leaders of small groups, we also want to encourage you to reinforce asking 3 questions in the small group setting every time you go into one of these lessons. So to begin with, the first question we'd really encourage you to ask is, what does this message say? There are always scriptural references for these lessons, so what does the message say? And then followed by that, what does it mean? What does the words in the Bible, what does it mean? And then finally, as you talk about it together, what you'll see is the ability to say, you know what, this is what it means to me. And that's the question. What does it mean to me? How can I use this when I go home? How can I use this in my workplace? How can I use this in the community with my friends? So those are the 3 questions we ask that you always reinforce in the small group meetings. And then finally, you know, we know this changes lives. We've been seeing it over and over again, And the reports that you send to us are just so amazing about how individuals and communities and, frankly, nations are being transformed one at a time. And finally, another point that we're just so pleased with is the way you have shared with us that these lessons always seem to point back to Christ. And it's so true. Whether it's in the Old or the New Testament, the messages are always pointing back to Christ, and the applications are as well. So we thank you for your feedback on that, and we just love the fact that that's how this is working for you. The impact then is pretty obvious. We're able to equip pastors, lay leaders, small group leaders, elders in the churches. And you have to remember, too, that in so many areas, maybe yours, the pastors are trained for maybe 3 months or 6 months or a year or 2 years. This is a tool that they can use for ongoing training for themselves to continue to grow in Christ and grow in the knowledge of what God is telling us through the words of Scripture and through the messages, through the meaning of the messages that you're hearing. So the last thing is that when this changes lives, it's able to do so because you're listening to the messages, you're discussing them, and you're able to share then what it means, especially in the family values. The Bible speaks so clearly about family values, so we definitely invite your attention to that series of teachings. So that's it as far as an overview, your orientation to it. And what we'd like to do is go into a whole new module and go into more depth about shaping the small groups, about best practices, and about just things to think about as you begin to use MBC in a small group environment. So we'll go to the next module, but first we'll take a break here and give you a chance again to discuss with one another what you've heard just now. Thank you again for your attention. God bless, and I'll see you in the next module.